Welcome to Books Recapped. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. The Hobbit. Second part, Chapter 11 to 19. For the first part, check out our previous Hobbit video. The link is in the description. As they approached the mountain, the land turned bleak and barren. All greenery and other living foliage had been burned away by smog. When they reached the foot of the mountain, Bilbo and 3 dwarves were sent to investigate the main entrance on the south side. However, the entrance looked far too dangerous. It was the gate that Smaug used, so the company decided to search for the secret door described on their map, which was on the west side of the mountain. After hours of searching, Bilbo finally located a narrow passage along a cliff that led to a flat, smooth patch on the mountain side. Though the patch must be the door, the dwarves couldn't find a way to open it, as they had forgotten the message that Elrond, the Elf Lord, had read from the map. The dwarves banged at the door with picks and axes, but to no avail. They grew discouraged. One evening, Bilbo was sitting outside the door, lost in thought, when a thrush landed nearby and began to knock a snail against a stone with its beak. Suddenly, the hobbit remembered the riddle on the map. He quickly gathered the other dwarves by the door, and they watched as the sun slowly set. With the sun's last light, a single ray fell on a part of the door, and there a rock fell away to reveal a keyhole. Thorin quickly took the key that came with the map and placed it in the rock. When he turned it, the door's outlines appeared. The dwarves and the hobbit pushed open the door and stared into the depths of the mountain before them. The company found themselves standing at the entrance of a dark passage leading into the mountain. Thorin, their leader, suggested that Bilbo, the official burglar, should go inside and gather information. Bilbo agreed, using his ring to make himself invisible. He made his way down the long, dark passage towards Smaug's lair. When he arrived, he saw the magnificent, fearsome dragon asleep on top of a pile of treasure. Smaug was red and gold, with fiery breath, sharp claws, and a hide as strong as diamonds. Bilbo was terrified but managed to gather the courage to take a single golden cup from the treasure. He then ran back up the passage to show the dwarves his prize. However, Smaug had not gone unnoticed the theft. When he woke up, he realized that one of the cups was missing and became enraged. He flew around the mountain, breathing flames, and saw the company's ponies at the foot of the mountain. He chased after them and devoured them. Meanwhile, the dwarves and Bilbo huddled in the secret passage, terrified of the dragon's wrath. Eventually, Smaug returned to his den and appeared to fall asleep. Bilbo, determined to gather more information, made his way back to the dragon's lair, only to discover that Smaug had been pretending to sleep and was actually waiting for him. Although he couldn't see Bilbo because of the ring, Smaug could smell him and greeted him mockingly. Bilbo, however, was quick-witted and answered the dragon's questions with riddles, which amused Smaug enough to calm his anger for a while. Through his clever wordplay, Bilbo was able to flatter the dragon into revealing his vulnerable underbelly, exposing a patch in his armor above his left breast. Bilbo ran back up the passage, narrowly escaping the dragon's flames. When he returned to the dwarves, he told them everything he had learned, with the nearby thrush seeming to listen in on their conversation. They heard the dragon's roar once more and quickly shut the door to the passage just before an avalanche came crashing down. They were now trapped inside the mountain. Smaug guessed from Bilbo's riddles that the company was connected to the men of Lake Town and flew there to seek revenge. The hobbit and dwarves waited in the dark passage until they couldn't take it anymore. They crept down towards Smaug's chamber, and upon realizing the dragon was gone, the dwarves ran towards the treasure in excitement, reminiscing about the prosperity of the past. Bilbo only took a few items, including the Oakenstone, a valuable gem that Thorin had been searching for. Bilbo also found a coat of mail made of mithril, a rare and valuable metal that was stronger and lighter than silver or gold. After the excitement died down, Thorin led the company through the mountain's passages and out the main gate at the source of the river running. They still had no idea what to do about the dragon when he returned. In the meantime, They were starving and followed the river down from the mountain to an old guard post cavern that hadn't been used since the days of Thorin's grandfather. There, they rested, ate, and wondered where the dragon had gone. As Smaug flew towards Lake Town, the people could see him from a mile away. At first, they thought his fire was the river running with gold. They prepared archers and buckets of water to douse the flames, but their efforts were futile. Smaug flew over the town and set every roof on fire. The dragon wreaked havoc on the town, causing destruction and fear among the people. The arrows of the townsmen bounced harmlessly off Smaug's diamond-like hide. With most of the men having abandoned the town, only one man remained, Bard, the captain of the archers. As he prepared his final arrow, a thrush landed on his shoulder and spoke to him in a language he could understand. The bird told Bard to look for a weak spot on the dragon, a patch on the hollow of its left breast. Bard did as he was told, and when he saw the opening, he let his arrow fly. It plunged through the gap in the dragon's armor and into its heart, causing the beast to come crashing down and destroying the rest of Lake Town in the process. Bard managed to dive into the water and join the rest of his people, who were mourning the dead and their lost town. Some blamed the dwarves for waking the dragon, while others assumed they too were dead. The lakemen then remembered the gold in the lonely mountain and eagerly thought of how it could help rebuild their town. News of Smaug's death quickly spread, reaching the Elven King and an army of elves, who stopped at Lake Town to offer aid. The humans and elves then joined together as one army and marched towards the lonely mountain. Most of them expected to find a massive treasure waiting for them. Meanwhile, the thrush returned to the company on the mountain and, unable to communicate with them, brought an old raven that could speak the common tongue. The raven told Bilbo and the dwarves of Smaug's death, and they rejoiced. However, their celebration was short-lived, as the raven went on to describe the large army of humans and elves marching towards them, as well as the suffering of the people of Lake Town, who deserved a share of the treasure in the mountain. Thorin, however, considered the treasure his inheritance and planned to fight for it, regardless of the suffering of the townspeople. Under Thorin's orders, the company retreated to the mountain and fortified it by building a wall at the main gate. From there, they watched as Bard and representatives of the elves approached. Bard informed them that he had killed Smaug and that Lake Town had been destroyed. He asked the dwarves to be generous in sharing the wealth of the mountain, considering the townspeople had suffered so much for it. Thorin refused, feeling that he owed the humans nothing as the gold originally belonged to his people. Bard gave Thorin some time to reconsider, but Thorin did not change his stance. The mountain was declared besieged, with nothing and no one allowed in or out by the elves and men. Bilbo, on the other hand, would have gladly shared the treasure, but, as a hobbit, he had no say in the dwarves' decision and was discouraged by the whole turn of events. Bilbo Baggins watched as the armies of men and elves faced off against the dwarves on the battlefield. The tension was thick as the two sides stood at a standstill, each waiting for the other to make the first move. As the dwarves searched for the Arkenstone, and the rest of the dwarves worried about the impending danger, Bilbo knew he had to take matters into his own hands. Using the power of the ring, he snuck away from the mountain at night and made his way to the camp of the lake men and the wood elves. When he arrived, Bilbo revealed himself and was brought before the leaders of the two armies, Bard and the Elven King. They were understandably suspicious of the Hobbit, but their doubts eased when Bilbo revealed the Arkenstone, which he offered as a bargaining chip to prevent a war. Bard and the Elven King were impressed by Bilbo's willingness to risk the wrath of the dwarves in order to prevent a bloody conflict. They asked him to stay in the camp for his own safety, but Bilbo decided to return to the mountain. On his way out, he ran into Gandalf, who praised him for his bravery. The next morning, Bard returned with two messengers to try and persuade Thorin to accept a peaceful resolution. But when the dwarf refused, Bard revealed the Arkenstone, the one treasure that Thorin valued above all others. Thorin was devastated and turned on Bilbo. who admitted that he had given the treasure to Bard. Just as Thorin was about to lash out in anger, one of the messengers revealed himself to be Gandalf. The wizard commanded Thorin to let Bilbo speak, and the hobbit claimed that he had taken his fair share of the treasure according to the terms of his contract as burglar. Thorin was forced to agree and offered to pay a 14th part of the treasure to regain the stone. But Thorin secretly hoped that before the exchange could be made, his relatives, who were marching towards the battlefield with an army led by Dain, would be able to capture the stone by force. This new dwarf army threatened the elves and men, and they were on the verge of engaging in battle when a darkness descended on the sky from the west. Gandalf warned them that a new danger had arrived, an army of goblins and wargs who intended to take the treasure for themselves. The forces of good were united against the goblins and wargs in the Battle of the Five Armies. The battle was fierce, with both sides fighting with all their might. Bilbo watched from a distance as the elves and dwarves fought off the goblins, but were forced to retreat from the vicious wargs. Thorin fought alongside the lake men with all his strength. But despite their best efforts, the goblins were slowly gaining ground. Bilbo was forced to retreat to the elves' camp, which was almost surrounded. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the hobbit spotted something in the sky. The great eagles were flying towards the battlefield. But before he could rejoice, a stone fell from the mountain and hit Bilbo on the head, and he lost consciousness. When Bilbo woke up, he was still lying on the side of the mountain with a pounding headache. But aside from that, he was unharmed. From the camps below, he saw that his side had won the battle against the goblins and wargs. A man came searching for Bilbo, but he couldn't be found until the hobbit remembered to take off his magic ring. Bilbo was carried back to the camp where Gandalf was waiting, relieved to see the hobbit alive. However, there was sad business to attend to. Bilbo had to say goodbye to Thorin, who was mortally wounded. Thorin asked Bilbo for forgiveness for the harsh words they had exchanged earlier. Fili and Kili had also been killed, but the rest of the dwarves had survived. Gandalf told Bilbo about the end of the battle. The eagles, who had been watching the goblins, arrived just in time and turned the tide of the battle. Things might have still gone badly if it weren't for the sudden appearance of Bjorn, who had transformed into a massive, enraged bear. This sent the remaining goblins running, and now they were all either dead or in hiding. The dead were buried, and Dain was crowned the new king under the mountain. The dwarves had made peace with the lake men and the wood elves. Bard was the new master of Lake Town, and he gave Bilbo a generous sum from his share of the treasure. Soon, it was time for the hobbit to return home. He traveled with Gandalf and Bjorn, taking the long way around Mirkwood, as there was no way Bilbo was going back into that forest again. They spent most of the harsh winter at Bjorn's house, enjoying many feasts and celebrations. In the spring, they continued on to Rivendell. There, Gandalf and Elrond exchanged tales of great deeds, both past and present, while Bilbo rested and recovered from his wounds and fatigue with the help of the elven magic. Bilbo learned that the reason Gandalf had left the company near Mirkwood was that he had been fighting alongside the Council of Wizards to drive the necromancer out of the forest. Finally, Bilbo and Gandalf traveled the last, long stretch of road back to the Hobbit lands. As they approached his home, Bilbo received a nasty surprise. He had been presumed dead, and his belongings were being auctioned off. Bilbo put a stop to the auction and recovered most of his valuables, but he was never fully accepted by the other hobbits again. They viewed his adventures with skepticism, and his return with gold and tales of dragons and war only confirmed their belief that Bilbo had gotten in over his head. However, Bilbo didn't mind. Now that he had a wizard, elves, and the occasional dwarf coming to visit him, he didn't care much for the company of respectable hobbits. Most importantly, he still had his kettle, his pipe, and all the comforts of his home at Bag End. This is the end of the book. Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to our channel. Pressing a like and commenting would help us greatly. You can also support us on Patreon, link in the description. See you soon on Books Recapped.